The night was quiet on the open plains, the kind of quiet that carried every sound like a secret. The wind whispered through the tall grass, and the faint cry of an owl echoed in the distance. Beneath that vast, star-filled sky, a small figure trudged along a dusty trail, clutching a worn satchel that seemed far too heavy for someone so small. The child's shoes were torn, the hem of their clothes frayed, and streaks of dirt mixed with the shine of tears on their face. With each step, the weight of a hard past pressed heavier, and yet, even in the silence, a voice trembled out, whipped. Like Mama was, the words broke apart in sobs, drifting into the night as if the stars themselves were listening. For years, the orphan had known nothing but cruelty. Treated like a burden, punished for things never done, and blamed for things never caused. Every memory seemed tied to pain, as though kindness were some distant rumor not meant for them. The child's mother had once whispered promises of better days of safety and love, but those dreams had been stolen away too soon, leaving behind only echoes of sorrow. And now, in the middle of nowhere, the orphan's tears fell freely, mixing with the dust beneath their feet until the sound of approaching hooves broke the stillness. A tall rancher, riding steady on a chestnut horse, pulled the reins gently when he spotted the figure ahead. The moonlight revealed the child's trembling form, shoulders shaking with each sob. The rancher dismounted slowly, his boots pressing into the earth with a quiet strength. He didn't rush forward. Instead, he stood a few paces back, watching carefully, the way a man watches a fragile creature that's known only hurt. His voice came low and calm, carrying the warmth of someone who had lived through storms but never lost his heart. "Child," he said gently, "you'll only know kindness here." The words fell soft as a blanket over the orphans, trembling. They didn't trust it at first. Kindness was a word that often came before betrayal. Still, the tone was different, the kind that made the sobs falter for just a moment. The child's wide eyes lifted, searching the stranger's face for any trace of cruelty, but instead found lines carved deep from years under the sun, and a gaze steady as the horizon itself. Could it be true? Could there really be a place where fear didn't follow every step? The rancher knelt down, lowering himself so his eyes met the child's. He didn't reach out yet, didn't try to pull them close, but simply stayed at their level, waiting with patience. Behind him, his horse shifted, the saddle creaking in the night. The land around them stretched endless and open, but in that moment, the small patch of dirt they stood on felt like the beginning of something new. The child's voice cracked as they asked, barely above a whisper, "Kindness." The man nodded slowly, and though the promise was simple, it carried a weight that felt stronger than steel. "You'll never feel a hand raised against you here. Only safety. Only care." He extended a hand, not forcing, only offering. The orphan hesitated, heart pounding with a mix of fear and longing. They wanted to believe more than anything that these words could be true. The memory of harshness lingered in their bones, but the hope of tenderness burned in their chest, fragile yet alive. Still, trust was not something easily given. The child stepped back, shaking their head, murmuring words they barely understood themselves. "Mama said people lie. Mama said they promise, then they hurt." The rancher's hand dropped, but not in disappointment. Instead, he nodded with quiet understanding. "Then let me prove it different," he replied. His voice didn't waver. There was no urgency, no demand, only a patience that stretched like the plains themselves. The air between them grew heavy, as if the earth held its breath. The rancher stood once more, adjusting the brim of his hat, then took a step back toward his horse. "I won't force you," he said, "but I reckon you're tired, and hungry too. My ranch isn't far. You can ride with me, or walk on your own. Either way, there'll be food and a warm place waiting." The orphan's stomach growled at the mention of food, betraying the hunger that had gnawed for days. Their hands clutched tighter at the strap of their satchel, weighing the choice between fear and hope. The rancher turned toward his horse, giving space, giving time. The child's eyes darted to the horizon, to the endless dark that offered no safety, and then back to the man who stood steady, his presence as calm as the land he worked. The silence stretched, broken only by the shifting of the horse's hooves and the restless beating of the child's heart. Every instinct screamed to run, to hide, to never trust. Yet, deep inside, another voice, softer but stronger, whispered that maybe, just maybe, this was the chance Mama had spoken of long ago. The chance for something better? The chance for kindness. And so, with trembling steps, the orphan edged forward, drawn not by certainty, but by the faint light of hope. The rancher didn't move, didn't push, simply waited. The child's voice cracked once more, raw and broken, carrying all the fear and yearning of their short, painful life. If I go, you promise? No hurt? The rancher's eyes softened, the firelight of truth steady within them. I promise, he said, and though the words were few, they carried the weight of a man who kept his word. The orphan stood still, caught between past scars and future possibilities, the night air heavy with choice. Would this stranger truly be different, or would the cruel cycle repeat? The stars above seemed to hold their breath as the child stared at the outstretched hand once more, hesitating at the edge of a decision that could change everything. And just as the first step was about to be taken, the distant sound of another rider echoed from beyond the hills, fast, heavy, and coming closer. The orphan's eyes widened in fear, the rancher's jaw tightened, and the quiet moment of fragile trust shattered into uncertainty. What danger rode toward them in the dark? And would this promise of kindness survive what was about to come? The thunder of hooves rolled over the hills, louder with every heartbeat, shattering the still night. The orphan froze, breath caught in their throat, eyes wide with panic. The rancher turned his head toward the sound, his posture tightening but not breaking. He stood tall, steady, as though he had faced storms like this before. His horse snorted and shifted, uneasy at the approaching rider. The open land was suddenly heavy with questions. Who was coming, and what did they want in the middle of the night? The orphan's body shook with memories. Every loud step, every shadow rushing near, had always meant danger. Fear burned in their chest, pushing them backward, away from the rancher, away from the sound. They'll hurt me, the child whispered, clutching the strap of the satchel so tight their knuckles turned white. The words were not aimed at anyone, just the air, as if speaking them would shield against what was coming. The rancher stepped closer, lowering his voice so it wouldn't rise above the hoofbeats. Stay behind me, he said. No one's laying a finger on you. The orphan hesitated, torn between mistrust and the faint glimmer of safety in the man's words. For the first time, they moved closer, inching behind his broad frame as the rider broke into view. A dark figure galloped over the ridge, the horse's mane flying, the rider leaning low as if chased by the very wind. Dust rose behind them, trailing like smoke. The orphan's pulse pounded as they pressed tighter to the rancher's back. Every muscle trembling, the rider pulled hard on the reins, the horse skidding to a halt in a shower of dirt and sparks from iron shoes. The stranger's face was hidden beneath the brim of a hat, shadowed even by the moonlight. Their voice came sharp and breathless. You seen anyone pass through here? The rancher didn't flinch, didn't show alarm, only rested a hand on the reins of his own horse. Can't say I have, he answered, calm but firm. The orphan's heart raced. Was this rider looking for them? Or was it something else entirely? The stranger's eyes flicked over the pair, lingering on the small figure half hidden behind the rancher. The orphan ducked their head, but the scrutiny felt like a knife. A shiver ran through their small body as they waited for the rider to call them out, to drag them back to a life of cruelty. But the rancher shifted his stance, subtly blocking the stranger's view, his presence like a shield. Long night for travel, he said evenly. You ought to be careful. Coyotes roam these hills when the moon's up. The rider studied him, silence stretching heavy. Then, without another word, they tugged the reins sharply and spurred the horse forward, vanishing back into the darkness as suddenly as they had appeared. The echoes of the hooves faded into the hills, leaving behind only the whisper of wind. The orphan's knees buckled with relief, and they collapsed to the dirt, breath coming in broken sobs. The rancher crouched beside them, his voice steady. You're safe. Whoever that was, they're gone. But the child shook their head, tears streaking down their dirt-smudged cheeks. "They'll find me. They always find me." Their words carried the weight of too many nights running. Too many doors slammed shut, too many hands raised in anger. The rancher didn't press for answers yet. He only placed a steady hand on the ground beside him, close but not touching, as if to remind the orphan he wasn't leaving. "Tell me," he said softly, "who do you think is after you?" The orphan's lips parted, but no sound came. Their chest rose and fell with ragged breaths as they clutched the satchel tighter. Whatever truth hid inside, it was wrapped in fear too deep to spill easily. Instead, they whispered, "Mama said to keep it safe. She said never let them take it." The rancher glanced at the satchel, worn and patched, yet guarded like treasure. He didn't ask more. Not yet. He knew some truths took time, and pushing too soon might break what little trust had begun to grow. They walked together in silence, the rancher leading his horse by the reins. The orphan followed close, eyes darting to the shadows, heart leaping at every sound. The ranch stretched wide ahead, a silhouette of fences and barns under the moonlight. Lanterns glowed faint in the distance, promising warmth and food. To the child, it looked both safe and dangerous. Safe because of what it offered. Dangerous because trusting it meant letting go of fear. Something they had lived with for so long. When they reached the porch of the ranch house, the rancher paused. "You're welcome inside," he said gently, "but only if you want to." The orphan stood still, staring at the doorway as if it were a line they weren't sure they could cross. Behind those walls was warmth, but also the unknown. "What if you change?" the child asked, voice breaking. "What if you say kindness now, and hurt later?" The rancher's eyes softened, his voice carrying the weight of truth. "Then I'd be no better than the ones you've run from. But I'll tell you plain, my word means something. You'll see it, not just hear it." He opened the door and stepped aside, leaving the choice with the child. The smell of stew drifted out, warm and rich, making the orphan's stomach twist with hunger. Still, they lingered on the porch, clutching the satchel, trembling with the war inside their chest, fear against hope, memory against longing. At last they took one step inside, then another, drawn by hunger, by exhaustion, and maybe by a fragile trust in the man who had stood between them and the rider. The fire crackled in the hearth, casting soft light across the room. A table stood ready with bowls and bread, and the orphan's eyes widened at the sight of it all. The rancher set a bowl on the table, then stepped back, giving space, giving choice. Slowly, the child set the satchel down on the floor, but kept it close, as though it were part of their own body. They ate in silence, spoon shaking in their small hand, eyes never leaving the rancher's figure across the room. He didn't push for words, only tended to the fire, letting the warmth and quiet speak louder than questions. Still, the orphan's mind raced. Who was that rider? Did they know about the satchel? Did they know about Mama's secret? And most of all, how long could safety last before the past caught up again? Later, when the bowl was empty and the fire burned low, the orphan curled on a blanket near the hearth, clutching the satchel like it was life itself. Sleep pulled at their eyes, but fear kept them half awake. The rancher's footsteps moved softly through the room, his voice a quiet murmur as he said, almost to himself, "No child should carry so much sorrow." Outside, the wind rose again, carrying with it the faint echo of hooves far in the distance. The orphans stirred, heart racing even in their half-dream. The rancher stepped to the window, jaw tight, watching the horizon. Trouble was riding closer, and the child's fragile hope had only just begun to take root. The night stretched on, heavy with unspoken questions. What was hidden inside that satchel? Why had the rider searched so fiercely? And could this fragile bond between a wounded child and a weary rancher hold strong when shadows closed in again? The fire crackled, the orphan's small body curled tighter, and the rancher kept watch by the window, knowing that peace was only borrowed time. The morning broke slowly, the first rays of sun spilling over the plains like a quiet promise. The ranch stirred awake with the soft clatter of pans in the kitchen and the low whinny of horses in the corral. The orphan opened their eyes to the sound of birdsong and the steady crackle of the dying fire. For a moment, there was peace, almost enough to believe the night before had been nothing but a dream. But then, their hands shot down to the floor, gripping the satchel, and the weight of reality came rushing back. The rancher was already outside, his voice carrying faintly through the window as he called to the horses. He moved with the calm rhythm of a man who had lived his whole life in tune with the land, measured, steady, dependable. But behind that calm was a quiet edge, sharpened by the memory of the rider who had appeared from the darkness. He had not slept much. The orphan could see it in the faint shadows under his eyes when he came in for breakfast. He set a plate on the table without a word, and though the child was hungry, they hesitated. Trust did not come with the sunrise. The silence stretched between them as the orphan picked at the bread, their eyes always flicking to the window, to the horizon. The rancher noticed. "You think they'll be back?" he said evenly. It wasn't a question. The child's hand froze mid-bite, and they nodded faintly. "They don't stop," came the quiet reply. "They always keep looking." The rancher leaned back in his chair, studying the child not with suspicion, but with patience. "Then we ought to be ready," he said, his voice steady. "But I can't help you if I don't know what you're running from." The orphan's eyes filled, but they shook their head fiercely. "I can't say. If I tell, it'll be worse. Mama said they'd do anything to take it." They clutched the satchel tighter, as if the secret inside was heavier than stone. The rancher didn't press further. He simply nodded, as though he understood the burden of keeping something too dangerous to speak aloud. "Then keep it close," he said. "But no, this you're not alone anymore. Not here." The day stretched on with work. The rancher showed the child the stables, the chickens, the fields, waiting for tending. It wasn't a demand, but an invitation. "If you want to help," he said, handing them a bucket, "there's always work to be done." The child watched him carefully, waiting for the harshness that always came with chores in the past, but there was none. The man corrected gently, showed by example, and never raised his voice. The orphan's hands shook at first, but slowly, as the sun climbed high, a strange rhythm set in. Work felt different when it wasn't punishment. Still, the shadow of fear lingered. Every distant sound of hooves sent the orphan's eyes darting to the hills. Every passing cloud felt like a sign of danger. And as the rancher worked the land, his mind churned with unease. Who was that rider? Why had they searched with such urgency? And why did this child carry a satchel as if the whole world depended on it? That evening, another thread of the story began to weave in. A neighbor stopped by a woman from the next ranch over, her wagon full of supplies. She greeted the rancher warmly, her laughter breaking through the tension in the air. But when her eyes fell on the orphan, her smile faltered, curiosity flickering. "Who's this?" she asked. The rancher's answer was simple: child who needed a place. The woman looked at the satchel, clutched in small hands, and frowned slightly. But she said no more. As she left, she whispered, "Be careful who you bring in. Not every burden's meant to be carried." The words stuck in the rancher's mind long. After the wagon disappeared down the trail, he didn't doubt his choice, but he knew others might. Whispers traveled fast across the plains, and soon the whole valley would wonder about the orphan. The rancher glanced at the child asleep by the fire that night, satchel tucked under their head like a pillow. And he knew the danger wasn't only from strangers. Suspicion from neighbors could be just as sharp as threats from riders. The days that followed settled into a strange balance. The child grew used to the ranch feeding chickens, fetching water, brushing down horses. Each small task chipped away at the layers of fear, but never erased them. At night, the orphan still woke with cries, clutching the satchel, whispering for Mama. The rancher never scolded, never pushed, only tended the fire, and sat close until sleep returned. Slowly, a bond began to grow, fragile as glass, yet real as the land itself. But danger was never far. One evening, as the sun bled red over the horizon, the sound of distant riders came again. This time, it wasn't just one. Several figures appeared against the fading light, too far to make out but close enough to stir fear. The orphan froze at the sight, pressing against the rancher's side. He placed a steady hand on their shoulder. "Inside," he said softly. "Stay low. Don't open the door for anyone but me." The child obeyed, slipping inside the cabin, clutching the satchel close. From the window, they peered out, heart pounding. The rancher stood firm on the porch, arms crossed, watching the figures draw closer. They slowed, circling near the edge of the property, not entering, but not leaving either. One raised a hand, calling out a greeting that didn't sound like peace. The rancher answered calm but sharp, his stance never shifting. The orphan couldn't hear the words, but the tone was clear. The riders wanted something. They searched, just like the lone figure from before. And though the rancher's voice carried strength, the child knew deep down they were the reason for this standoff. Fear twisted in their stomach if the rancher kept protecting them. He'd draw trouble on himself. What if he regretted his promise of kindness? What if he turned them out to save his ranch? The riders lingered long, their presence heavy as storm clouds, before finally pulling away into the dark. But the silence they left behind was not relief, it was warning. The orphan lay awake that night, eyes fixed on the satchel, knowing the secret inside was the reason for all of it. The rancher kept watch again, his rifle resting near his chair, his eyes on the horizon. He didn't ask, didn't demand answers. But the weight of the unsaid pressed heavy between them both. By the third night of riders on the hills, the tension grew unbearable. The child began to whisper to the fire, words too soft for the rancher to hear. "Mama, I kept it safe. I didn't let them take it. But how long can I keep it?" The satchel seemed to hum with its own silence, guarding a truth that could either save them or destroy everything around them. The days turned darker. It's not from the sky, but from the weight of what was coming. The orphan could feel it in their bones, the way danger seemed to stalk the edges of the ranch like a wolf circling prey. Every night the riders appeared on the ridge, silhouettes against the moon, watching but never striking. Their patience was worse than an attack. It meant they were waiting, and waiting always meant a plan. The rancher never said much about it, but his actions told the truth. He sharpened tools that had nothing to do with farming. He checked the locks on the doors twice over. He stacked extra wood by the fire as if preparing for long nights awake. To the orphan, his calmness was both comforting and terrifying. He moved like a man who had seen storms before and knew one was coming again. One evening, as the last light drained from the horizon, the orphan finally whispered what had weighed on them since the night Mama's voice had faded forever. They sat by the fire, the satchel between them and the flames. Their voice cracked as they said, "It's not mine. What's in here? It's what they want. It's why they'll never stop." Their small hands clutched the leather strap until their knuckles went white. The rancher's gaze softened, but he didn't ask to see. Instead, he said quietly, "You've carried enough. You don't have to face this alone anymore." The words stirred something in the child hope. Yes, but also guilt. They wanted to trust him to hand over the burden, but Mama's warning echoed, never let them take it. And so the satchel stayed in their lap, heavy as ever. That same night, the riders grew bolder. Instead of circling the ridge, they came closer, hooves pounding the earth until dust rose in clouds. Lanterns swung from their saddles, glowing like fireflies, too many to count in the dark. From the cabin window, the orphan's breath hitched as they saw the light spread wide, surrounding the ranch. The rancher stood on the porch, rifle in hand, his shadow long against the lantern glow. He didn't fire, didn't shout. He only waited, a figure carved in patience and steel. The riders halted at the fence line, their leader pushing forward. His voice carried loud and sharp across the land. "We know what you've got. Hand over the child and the bag, there'll be no harm to your land." The words sliced through the night, cruel and certain. Inside, the orphan's heart stopped. They pressed the satchel tight against their chest, terror flooding every vein. The rancher's reply came steady, not raising but carrying. "This land's mine, and those under my roof are mine to protect. You want trouble? You'll find it here, but you won't find surrender." The silence that followed was suffocating, broken only by the restless stomp of horses. The orphan crouched low, tears streaking their cheeks. They whispered to themselves, "He doesn't know what he's up against. They'll burn it down. They'll destroy everything." The riders didn't charge, not yet. They pulled back, fading into the dark once more. But the message was clear. They knew, they were certain. And they weren't leaving without what they wanted. The next day was heavy with dread. The rancher kept working, but there was no peace in the rhythm of his chores. He fixed fences, reinforced doors, set tools where they could be reached quickly. The orphan followed him silently, the satchel never leaving their side. Every sound made them jump: the call of a hawk overhead, the crack of wood splitting, the far-off thunder that might not be thunder at all. As dusk fell again, the sky turned blood-red, as though the land itself knew what was coming. The rancher stood with the child at the edge of the field, staring at the horizon. Dust clouds were rising, larger than before, a sure sign the riders were returning in force. The orphan trembled, clutching his sleeve. They won't stop. Not unless they get it. Their voice broke. Maybe I should go. Maybe I should give it to them. I don't want them to hurt you. The rancher knelt, his eyes steady and fierce. Don't you say that? You've carried something no child should ever have to carry. But you're not alone anymore. If they want it, they'll have to come through me first. His words were iron, but the orphan still shook. They had seen cruelty win too many times to believe kindness could hold against it. By nightfall, the riders came again. This time there was no circling, no testing. The glow of their lanterns burned brighter, their voices rose sharper, filling the valley with threats. The orphan clutched the satchel under the table, heart pounding as the rancher stood in the doorway, rifle at the ready. The air itself felt tight, silence between shouts carrying more weight than the words. The leader's voice cut through the dark once more. Last chance. Hand it over, or we take it. The orphan's chest heaved with sobs they tried to hold back. Every memory of Mama's warnings, every night of running, every bruise of the past came crashing together. They could feel the climax building, the storm breaking. The satchels seemed to pulse in their grip, its secret begging to be revealed, to end the chase. But the rancher's figure stood firm in the doorway. Unyielding, the riders began to move, their formation shifting, their horses pawing the ground like thunder ready to strike. The orphan's scream caught in their throat as the first rider spurred forward. And the night exploded with motion. Would the rancher's promise hold true? Would kindness survive the fire about to fall on them? Or would the orphan's secret finally tear everything apart? The answers hovered just beyond reach, suspended in the moment before impact. As the storm of hooves and shadows bore down on the little ranch in the dark, the night erupted into chaos as the riders charged. Lanterns swinging wildly, hooves pounding like thunder across the earth. The orphan clung to the satchel, frozen between fear and resolve. While the rancher braced himself in the doorway, rifle lifted steady in his hands. The sound of horses tearing across the plain filled the air, joined by the shouts of men who had hunted too long and come too far to turn back empty-handed. The orphan's breath came in ragged bursts, their heart threatening to break free from their chest. The first rider broke ahead, pushing hard toward the house. The rancher fired, not to kill but to warn, the shot ringing sharp across the valley. The horse reared back, skidding, throwing sparks from its shoes. The man cursed, pulling hard on the reins, his lantern swinging in a wild arc before it shattered against the dirt. Darkness swallowed that corner of the yard, the fire snuffed out in seconds. The others slowed, not expecting resistance so firm, not expecting a man to stand so tall when outnumbered. Inside, the orphan trembled. The satchel dug into their arms like iron. They remembered Mama's words, spoken in whispers on her last night. Keep it safe. Don't let them take it, no matter the cost. It's the truth they fear most. The words rang louder now than ever, and for the first time, the orphan wondered if holding on to the satchel was not just about survival, but about something far greater. The riders circled again, their leader pushing forward, voice sharp with anger. You can't hold out against all of us, old man. That bag doesn't belong to the child. Hand it over, and we'll leave this place standing. Refuse, and we'll tear it down to the ground. His words sliced through the night like blades. each one heavy with threat. The rancher stood steady, his rifle still raised, his voice unshaken. What's inside that bag belongs to the one who carries it. And as long as they're under my roof, you'll not touch them. You want it? You'll have to come through me. The orphan's throat tightened, eyes burning with tears. No one had ever spoken for them like that before. No one had ever chosen to stand between them and danger. It was a shield stronger than iron, built from words and resolve. The leader growled, his hand rising to signal an attack. But before the riders could move, the orphans stumbled forward. Satchel clutched to their chest. Their voice cracked as it spilled into the night. Stop. You'll never stop unless you know. You'll never leave me be unless you see. The words broke the standoff, pulling every eye toward the small figure trembling in the doorway. The rancher turned sharply, his voice low and urgent. Don't. But the orphans shook their head, their face pale but resolute. With shaking fingers, they unbuckled the strap and pulled open the satchel. Inside lay a bundle wrapped in old cloth, worn from years of clutching and running. Slowly, they peeled it back, revealing yellowed papers and faded ink. The riders leaned forward, straining to see, their shouts falling into silence. The rancher frowned, puzzled, but he kept his rifle ready. The orphan's voice rose. Steadier now, though, still laced with fear. It's not gold. It's not jewels. It's the truth. My mama. She worked for them. She wrote down what they did. All the lies, all the names, all the harm they caused. She said one day it had to be known. She said they'd try to bury it forever, but I had to keep it safe. The orphan's small hands trembled as they held out the bundle. This is why they want it. Not because it's treasure, but because it's proof. A ripple went through the riders, unease breaking their unity. Some shifted in their saddles, faces grim, while others muttered curses under their breath. Their leader's jaw tightened, fury flashing in his eyes. That's enough lies from a child, he spat. Hand it over now. The rancher's voice cut through the dark like steel. Looks to me like the only liar here is you. If what the child says isn't true, why chase them across half the land? Why ride in the night, burning with anger if there's nothing to hide? His words landed heavy, and a few of the riders turned uneasy glances toward their leader. Doubt began to spread like cracks in stone. The leader barked for silence, but it was too late. His men had seen the papers, had heard the fear in his voice. The truth weighed heavier than his threats. One by one, the riders began to pull back. Not toward the ranch, but away from it. Uneasy at being tied to a secret too dangerous to hold. Within moments, the leader found himself with only a few still at his side. He cursed, spat into the dirt, and glared at the orphan with eyes full of hate. This isn't over, he snarled, before turning his horse and vanishing into the night, his loyal few following close behind. Silence fell, broken only by the distant thunder of hooves fading into the horizon. The orphan collapsed to their knees, the satchel falling open at their side. Papers spilling across the porch like fallen leaves. Their chest heaved with sobs, but this time it was not only fur it was release. Years of running finally finding a place to rest. The rancher crouched beside them, one hand steady on their shoulder. You did what you had to, and now you're free of carrying it alone. The days that followed brought change. Neighbors came, drawn by whispers of the night standoff, curious and cautious. Some doubted, some believed, but none could deny the riders had not returned. The papers, worn though they were, found their way into hands that could spread their truth further, into towns where words carried weight. The orphan no longer had to clutch the satchel to their chest day and night. It no longer held just fear, but hope. Life at the ranch grew steady again, the rhythm of work and rest finding its way back. The orphan learned the chores not out of duty but pride, their hands growing stronger, their eyes brighter. The rancher's house, once quiet and lonely, filled with laughter that had been buried for too long. At night, when the fire glowed low, the child would whisper to the flames, "Mama, I kept it safe. It's done now. I'm home." The rancher never asked for thanks, but the bond between them grew deep, forged not just by danger, but by trust. The orphan had found more than shelter, they had found belonging, something they never thought possible. And though shadows still lingered on the horizon, though danger might one day return, they knew they would not face it alone again. The story closed, not with the clash of hooves or the echo of gunfire, but with the quiet strength of love and truth. A child once broken by fear had found a place to stand tall, and a man once hardened by solitude had found someone to protect, someone to call family. In the end, the lesson was simple but lasting. Kindness, though often tested, can hold stronger than cruelty. And the truth, though hunted and hidden, can never be silenced forever. The wind swept gently across the plains as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in gold and crimson. The orphan and the rancher stood side by side at the fence, watching the horizon not with fear, but with hope. The past was behind them, the secret no longer a burden, and the future stretched wide and open, as endless as the land itself.